the music, the game, everything that is coming with the Philadelphia Eagles discussion, Nick Foles and beyond. We'll sneak some other stuff in with John, as we always do. I wondered, you didn't prepare him, right, for the other stuff? Okay, good. Because John McMullen is best when he's caught with stuff fresh. The wheels that work inside his mind. I love it. John, how you doing today?
Doing well. I think those wheels are going to put me away at some point.
No, listen, it's not like the hamster wheel that's just going round and round. There's actually progress in your wheels. And I never know. Do I bring you on when the music is still going, or do I talk until the music's... Because normally if it's a caller or even a regular guest, then you kind of wait for the music to die down. But that's your intro music. So I'm never sure of if I should let you talk over your own intro music or not.
No, I think you go before the music ends, sort of like a disc jockey, and that way you don't have to pay royalties. Although that's everybody can use that music.
Look at you. You're going second, third level knowledge of ASCAP and BMI and having to pay off royalties if you play a song for more than 90 seconds, I believe, on the air. See, you know everything, John. That's how I bill you, as not NFL insider, not national NFL reporter, not locally here in Philadelphia for multiple outlets, of course, including 97, but the man who knows everything. That's how I bill you, see?
Well, I have enough knowledge to be dangerous. Let's put it that way.
Listen, they killed Socrates because of his knowledge. Be careful. All right. So, if you believe he ever existed, let me qualify that statement. So, the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me ask you a very simple question to begin. What is different inside this locker room that you haven't seen since that run in the Super Bowl?
I got to be honest, as we've gotten toward the end of the season, it's kind of a weird dynamic because the Eagles are obviously making a run, playing as well as they've played throughout the season, playing their best football, which is what you like. And it's kind of a weird dynamic because they've scaled back. They don't practice. This is the second straight week. They've just had a walkthrough on Wednesday, which is normally the heaviest practice day of the week. So it's weird. It's kind of a weird dynamic. And at some point I joked, are they giving up and they keep winning anyway? Because they don't seem to be preparing like you would normally be ramping up to prepare, but it's all working. It's all coming up. Aces for Doug Peterson, and from that standpoint, it's very similar to last season when it seems like every decision he made worked out. And that's what's kind of changed over the past 2 weeks. You look at their fourth down success, for instance. Well, where was that earlier this season? All of a sudden, they're 4 for 4. And you know, getting the players and keeping them fresh, it seems everything he does at this moment seems to be working, so some of the magic is back.
It's amazing to see that. And then you add what happened on the field on Sunday, and you look at Nick Foles. That was – I know that the magnitude of the Super Bowl is clearly different, and I would never equate even a playoff game to the Super Bowl as far as level of importance. But when you just extract – Nick Foles and what he did, like if you only just saw the film of Foles and you didn't even know when he was playing these teams, I don't know if we've seen him look much better or at all better than what we saw on Sunday, John. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, second half, I would agree. First half, I mean, there were some issues as far as missed throws. He was a little bit high early, had the big turnover. So I don't know about the full 60 minutes because I think he was phenomenal in the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. I think that was the apex. And I've said, you know, it's weird, but if Carson Wentz is healthy, it's very unlikely he plays that well in those two games. Now, you might go on and win. You might win in different fashion, but it's very unlikely anybody could play as well as Nick Foles played in those two games. You got that sort of in the second half against the Panthers. And then the Hollywood aspect of it, taking the big hit, leaving for a play, coming back to cheers, making the big throw, standing in. I joked about it earlier in the week. If you did take that script to Hollywood, they might kick you out of the office because it's not believable.
I don't know how.
Sorry, John. He keeps doing it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to lead into. Is I don't know specifically how this whole thing ends, and we are such in the Hollywood society of when we have a great story, we just want to fast forward. Well, how is it going to end? Is it going to be positive? Are they going to trade him? Whatever the case may be, we always jump to that. But this ride and what Nick Foles has been able to do to revive, as you mentioned, this energy that we talked about from the jump. I was trying to have this conversation or figure out on my SB Nation show, and you're a perfect person to ask this. We came up with one example, and that was Alabama not this year, but last year when Tua takes over, and then what happened since. But I don't know in a professional setting if you have ever seen a backup who, let's be honest, doesn't have the skill set that the starter does, but a team you can argue is responding better to a backup to this level. I don't know if we've seen that before in pro sports.
Well, yeah, I always say you see it in small doses. For the first week, I think you see it a lot because people focus more, they ratchet down. Players know they got to do a little bit more, they got to be a little bit cleaner. Coaches know they got to do things better, they got to coach better, and everybody focuses in. So on a small sample size, it can work, but to work to the degree of Nick Foles and the way it has, dating back to last season, and now coming back in, because you remember, you go to the first 2 weeks, it wasn't that pretty when he was the starting quarterback against Atlanta and Tampa Bay, and now he comes in, and for whatever reason, when Nick feels, look, there's nothing to lose, and he goes, what's the worst that can happen? You lose, you're expected to lose, you're out of the playoffs. That's what everyone expected. When he seems to get to that point, he seems to play at this incredibly high level. So I think a lot of it is stress-free, playing with house money, whatever you want to call it. Nobody expected him to beat the Rams. Nobody expected him to beat Houston. Nobody expected them to be in the playoffs, and here they are with at least an opportunity.
Do you think that it's as simple as the Skins are so banged up, quarterback situation, issues with cutting players? Now, again, people may rally around the fact that the Skins cut DJ Swearinger, but there's still so much internal turmoil. And the way in which the Eagles are clicking, beating back-to-back 10-win teams, the way in which they did, that this is really – I know we like to overthink things in sports, John, but sometimes things are just really easy and simple. This seems like it's just one of those simple things, like everything with momentum and the way in which the Eagles are playing versus the opposite with the Skins says the Eagles are going to walk in there and let them have it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is pretty simple. You can't be set up more beautifully. This is on the tee. This is up there for them. All they got to do is swing. You're right. I mean, that team, look, they fought so hard in Tennessee. They outplayed the Titans for the majority of that game. They had an opportunity to stay in this, and they lost. So that, from that standpoint, I think you have the human nature of realizing it's over. So certain guys are going to check out. And you mentioned the mess that front office is in Washington, and DJ Swearinger and cutting him, fourth quarterback. Yeah, I mean, there's no way the Eagles are losing this game. So it'll all come down to Minnesota, Chicago. And are the Bears going to play to win that game? Matt Nagy said today, again, he would. But as I often point out to people, coaches aren't under oath in these press conferences. Mm-hmm. And I don't see why. I really don't see why the Chicago Bears would want to win this game. There's only one reason, and that's to get a first-round bye. And they know. Matt Nagy's not a dumb guy. There's no way the 49ers are beating the Rams in L.A. So that's off the table. And at that point, who would you rather play, Minnesota or Philadelphia, coming in as hot as the Eagles are? I don't think he wants to win this game, no matter what he says.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something that definitely concerns me. But if I can have this conversation with you, and I don't know how many people are willing to have this conversation, but I think people like yourself who cover the team and are objective and honest about the coverage, it's a good place to start, someone like you. The issues that I've seen this year are going to be separate from whether or not the Eagles make the playoffs. Is that fair? Meaning, clearly, the injury concern around Carson Wentz, not injury-prone concern, but just the injuries this year that had an impact on him and the offense, getting better at certain positions, guys like Sproles and Jason Peters, who you can't count on. I feel like there are so many internal issues that were kind of like, what, we don't have any problems. The team just won the Super Bowl without Carson Wentz. So what problems are they going to have to now, wait a second, there are some issues, meaning my day will be ruined if the Vikings beat the Bears, or when the Vikings, in my opinion, beat the Bears, John, but that's not going to be the determining factor on how I feel about the season. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think win, lose, in, out. I think the Eagles have certain issues that they have to address. We all know what they are. Those don't change depending if they get into the playoffs or don't get into the playoffs. They just get pushed back a little bit. And that's really the only difference. I mean, there's turnover every year in this league. And there's going to be significant turnover for the Eagles. And they have some hard decisions to make. Doug Pearson talked about it today. He got asked about Darren Sproles. Love to have him back, he said. Jordan Hicks, interestingly enough, he didn't give such effusive praise to. Kind of pushed it off. Well, we'll talk about that in the spring.
Right.
There's a lot of questions. Jason Peters, as you mentioned, does he want to continue to play? If he doesn't, they got to find a left tackle. Too many people assume Lane Johnson's going to move to left tackle. That was the original plan. That's no longer the plan. Jeff Stoutland has made it very clear, time and time again, Lane Johnson's a right tackle. They're not moving him. So they don't want to stick with Big V. I think that's evident. So a lot of questions. Michael Bennett, Brandon Graham, are they going to be back? All over both sides of the football. And they do need to get younger. I don't think there's any question about that.
Is there any capacity in which Nick Foles comes back to the Philadelphia Eagles without taking a significant pay cut? I don't see it.
No, he can't. It's a mutual option. The Eagles would have to pay him $20 million to come back. He can't.
Now, I gave you an out. You could have come out and said he could win the Super Bowl.
No, I don't care if he wins the Super Bowl. He's not coming back at that number.
Thank you. Why don't people accept that? Why am I seeing on Twitter some idiot with a platform up in Philadelphia irresponsibly, that moron Missinelli, saying that he would, and then starting, because I know he doesn't prep, and I know he doesn't watch games, and he came out and he started this damn thing on Monday, and now I'm seeing columns on Twitter, and I'm seeing other people take this into their own hands because they think it's okay to have this conversation because that moron who doesn't watch a damn thing came out because he needed phone calls on Monday and said, well, I'd trade Carson Wentz for Saquon Barkley. Why don't people understand that even if Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl, he's not coming back unless he takes a 90% pay cut?
Yeah, and
End of rant.
The second part, there's a weird narrative that Nick would potentially take less money to come back as backup. That's not true as well, and he stated that on numerous occasions. You know, people assume because Nick has said in the past that, look, he understands a bad situation versus a good situation as far as a starting job in this league. But he's also a very, very competitive guy, which he also admitted. And he does want to be a starter in this league. And he does want to make $20 million plus. And he is going to make $20 million plus somewhere because somebody's going to make the mistake of paying him that much money. But it's not going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm sorry. I know there's an emotional attachment. I know he won the Super Bowl. And if he wins it again, that would be the greatest story in the history of the NFL. But that's not going to happen either. I got news for people. There's no way they're going to New Orleans with Nick Foles as a starting quarterback and beating that team.
No, thank John McMullen joining me, Eytan Shander, in for Mike Gill,
Eytan, real quick, there's another idiot in Philadelphia looking for calls or something who said Joel Embiid is the best player in Sixers history. That might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, I saw you respond to that tweet. I don't think that he's not. Okay, Joel Embiid is not the best player in Sixers history, and I don't think that he's there. But let me ask you this: how far away do you think we are from having that conversation? Because I think
about
that honestly,
10
John,
years,
I don't.
A couple
how many
NBA titles and 10 All-Star appearances and a couple MVPs.
Skill set wise. Okay, I think from an accomplishment.
Well, that's what I mean. If people want to say he's got the potential to be the best player in history, he's got the skill set, I would take no issue with it. But
no, I thought you guys were both being facetious on that tweet. Was he being serious?
Yes.
I thought you guys were both. I thought it read like the two of you were going back and forth being facetious.
No, only one of us was being facetious.
Ah, that's how good your facetiousism is, that you can trick me. Well, okay, yeah. I agree with you that Joel Embiid is not the best player in Sixers history, and he is not close to being the most accomplished player in Sixers history. If you were to take the top 5 players that you would say are the best in Sixers history, my question to you would be, and this is not justifying that tweet or that sentiment by any means, but I am curious what you think about this. How far away do you think, not from an accomplishment standpoint, but from a skill set standpoint, meaning you're confident he'll get to that point of accomplishment, how far away do you think Embiid is from Iverson, Barkley? Wilt is such a tough one because of when he played and how little he played here, right? So,
well, he played a long time here before he with both the Warriors and 76ers, but
Warriors, but I mean, now we're going back to a different game.
Yeah, but that was my argument. I think, and here's the thing, with all these people who like to do, and this is what I was facetious about, who like to play, as I call it, the time machine game. And they penalize Wilt Chamberlain because he was the only dominant big man. And say, well, if you drop Joel Embiid in that era, he would dominate. Well, why, if you drop Wilt Chamberlain in this era, the DNA that created that monster, with the advancements and evolution of sports science and nutrition, and Wilt was one of the best athletes in the world, talking about a guy who was going to box the heavyweight champion of the world at one point, and he always kept himself in shape, which Joel Embiid doesn't do. I don't understand why it doesn't work both ways.
Well, that's
fair. He would be just as dominant in this era because he would be in shape and he would use those advancements to dominate the way he did back in that era. And that's why I always argue you can only judge people in the era they are in. And when they have to change the rules of the game because you're too dominant, Joel Embiid doesn't belong in the same conversation as Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh, okay, and I think that the whole see, I'm with you until the game-changing thing, and I think what happens is that the game, it's almost like you look at the evolution of society like you look at the evolution of a game, right, where you don't know that you're better off until you have the benefit of hindsight, and I think the game was still growing to that point. Like, you can make the argument now that there are plenty of people in the NBA that would cause you to raise the height of the rim, right? Because from dunking to shooting to anything along those lines. And if they did it, I don't know if it would be specifically needed so much as it would be to limit an advantage of some of the better players.
Well, yeah, I mean, the game's always involved, and you'll get no argument from me in any sport that the athletes today are better than the athletes of the past because of what we just spoke about. and the advancements in nutrition and working out and just sports science in general, that part is, you'll get a stipulation from me. The part that seems to push that, and the part they don't understand is what I just talked about. You have to judge each era in its own. And when people dominate in an era, we use Steph Curry as an example because he's changed the game. He's changed the NBA game. I always talk about if a coach, teaching youth saw some of the shots, had some of the kids take shots that Steph Curry does, what would they do? They would yell at him. They would say, "Don't do that. Don't shoot from 30 feet. It's absurd." He's changed the entire game of basketball because of his skill set. Now, I'm not going to blame him for that. He's unbelievable. Yeah. He's transcended the game. He has changed the way the game is played. I don't understand why that's a criticism. But for past eras, like when it happens with Chamberlain, it seems to be a criticism because nobody else could deal with them. There are no athletes today where you say number one is so far better than number two, they're not within earshot. They're not within, and that's what.
Can't we make that argument with quarterbacks? I mean, I know Joe Montana and Dan Marino and Bart Starr.
Well, yeah, I talked with Malcolm Jenkins. It's interesting you bring that up because Malcolm doesn't believe Joe Montana is one of the top quarterbacks of all time because he thinks the game has evolved to, and he's right, to create these players like Patrick Mahomes who has these awful mechanics but is able to play the game at a different level. He brings sort of a baseball mentality. He throws sidearm. He throws off balance. He throws across his body. Those are poor habits in a traditional football sense, but it works for him. Again, the same thing I said with Steph. I'm not going to criticize it. It works for him. But what I think Malcolm doesn't understand, for Joe Montana's era and his dominance, you can't ignore that.
Right.
It was a different game, but at his level and what he performed at, if you're just going to use statistics, that means Eli Manning and Mitchell Trubisky are better than Joe Montana this season. And we all know that's not true.
Definitely with Eli. I'm still, jury's out on Mitch. John, listen, we could do this all day, but I'm being told we have to break, unfortunately, sir. So that's all for me.
All right, Eytan. Appreciate it.
Listen, John, it's always a pleasure, and look forward to chatting with you on Friday as we get ready for this game. We'll dive a little deeper into that matchup as well. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, man.